down 3 planes.
8 missions you were lucky, 10 somebody up there liked you, 25 was almost an impossibility.
The plane blew up and I got knocked out.
Welcome to Air Combat Journal. Today's journal entry features World War II German Me-109 pilot Horst Petzschler, or for our German and European friends, Bf-109 pilot Horst Petzschler. Horst flew 297 air combat missions on both the Eastern and Western fronts. He had 26 confirmed victories and was shot down 13 times. In an unfortunate twist of fate, he ended up in a Russian P.O.W. camp after the war. This is part 2 in a 2-part series featuring Horst. This is your pilot, John Sermon, asking you to strap in and sit back. Air Combat Journal is ready for takeoff. Head-to-head with the P-51.
One was head-on near Frankfurt. That was after I had the B-17. I saw I counted, I think, 7 parachutes out of the B-17 and looked up and saw the Mustangs coming down on me. And there was only one way, either go down, then I had them on my tail, and they came down with overspeed. They would have caught me in no time. The shortest way, nose to nose. And that took a second of courage, you know, I mean, something that made you do that automatically. Yeah? There was no time to think, you just did it. And I aimed at him, and I shot. At that time I had already learned the deflection shooting. I held 5 lengths ahead of him, let the Mustang fly right through my whole powerful ammunition. That was armor-piercing ammunition, mine ammunition, all mixed. And he exploded. I hardly turned around and wanted to be ready for second attack, and I saw a fireball, and that was the end of that Mustang. And the other ones swirled around a little bit, but then they tried to follow me, and I was nothing but giving the stick down and get away out of it, you know. But they followed me to the center of Germany, in Thuringia. Fritzlar was the airport, and I crash landed more or less there. Undercarriage broke down, and they were shortly behind me, and the flak gave them a good brush off. They were alert there, and I was totally shot, you know. So confused. They took me in the mess hall and treated me, and my wingman also landed there, and he couldn't fly no more. He had a nervous breakdown. Yeah. So I flew his plane back to mine was, I crashed kind of ringelpiece, what you call it. The one wheel broke in, and I spun around, but got out, and of course I was so completely confused, and well, I recovered, and the commanding officer there came and asked me where was my takeoff place, where we did start our flights, and I named the place in Russia, which was not true. I couldn't even remember the name of my base, Burg near Magdeburg. And so upside down you could be from that tangling around. But in time I came through and recovered, and I was able to fly back to my base. Yeah. Reported, and as usual my squadron commander, Walter Bohrt, Horst, we have another plane ready. If you want, just fly it today, that you are ready for tomorrow. That was the answer. They had always enough new planes. But you know, they were all not flown before. Factory new, just brought to our airport. You had actually to fly 10 hours, low rating and low RPM to fly the engine in. You know, they called it Schonflug, to prepare the engine. Not combat speed, not at all. from the beginning, takeoff to the landing, you should not cross over 2200 or so RPM. So that was a must to give the engine a break-in time. I think that's what they called it, to break. And we had plenty of new planes, and I took always some students or beginners that just came from the school with me. They flew, and we made immediately more training flights with that to use the time up, you know, because the gas gotten rarer and rarer. We lost Romania, our big resource.
As the war progressed, fuel rationing restricted flight training time.
The rations to the schools were shorter, you know, and you couldn't give them so much training time. We were reduced to 25 hours for a fighter pilot to start flying in the light sports plane and then put them as soon as possible on a fighter. All you have to do, take off, shoot a bomber down, and even if you don't come back, you had the success. That was the talk, you know.
The German fighter that was designed to ram Allied bombers.
That was the Focke-Wulf 198. That was armor-plated on the side. And mostly the storm group that Oscar Bösch flew in had these Stormberg box, they called them. They were heavy and had 3-centimeter cannons. And well, and these pilots signed up either shoot one down or ram. They called them ramming boys or you know, the Lille Saint-Omer group there. And Oscar was voluntarily in one of those squadrons. I think he had 2 or 3 rammings. The aircraft was important. It was 10 men out of combat. And for us, it was one that could probably fly tomorrow again. Yeah? So the aircraft was nothing, and we were able to repair tremendously well a fighter aircraft that were belly landed, not as a Mustang that had the scoop underneath. That plane was finished when they made the belly landing, not the 109. The 109 had 2 to 8% damage. With the prop bent, the prop could be refurbished in a die. They dismantled the prop, the 3-blade prop, you know, and put them in a die, reformed, heat treat the aluminum and shaped it up again, balanced it out, and they had a new prop. Yeah, they didn't have to produce a new prop. They used the old one, just repaired. And under the 109, Messerschmitt 109, you had the tank that was cleaned out from sand and debris, and they could use the tank mostly, repaired. Then there was not much damage on the belly, you know, that was all flush.
Luftwaffe pilot Franz Stigler allows a wounded B-17 to continue limping home.
Oh yeah, that was the story from he is now in Canada, an Oberleutnant, and he let him fly home. First of all, he wanted to bring him down, and then he was looking at the B-17. They were hanging out the bomb bay and so, and I mean out of the tail section, and he showed them even the direction to England and let them go.
Yeah.
What was Stigler? Franz Stigler is his name.
Yeah.
And of course, if he, the squadron would have known, they would have court-martialed him, you know. But I think he had already that day 2 victories, and when he saw that crippled B-17, he let him fly home. Yeah.
Was the story of a feigned surrender of a B-17 that led to the vendetta against the 100th Bomb Group true?
It might have happened. I am not aware when it happened. I heard that story too. And sure, if we could pick out the 100th group, there was something that fighters wanted to guide them down to airport, and then they opened fire, and then of course they pointed out, okay, next time we treat you as you have to be treated. There were animosities or whatever you call it. I was a guest speaker with the 91st Bomb Group, General Bray. Well, in the beginning, I was a little bit scared to open up. So he gave me, since you never had a B-17, I give you one here at that meeting. And he put me a golden B-17 tag on, I was too scared to tell the general that I had a B-17. But we got good friends for years and years, and I came to their shows, and so, that was General Bray.
Did you pay attention to the B-17's tail markings to identify the different bomb groups?
More groups that flew in the west. You see, I came from the east, and they were more informed about the different signs, the square on the tail or the triangle or the numbers, and so they were much more aware what they attacked. We didn't have all the information. We were brought in new from the east, and we just had to learn practically.
Was the new Eastern Front assignment better than flying at the Russian front?
Well, from my view, it was definitely more dangerous, I mean, we had still the air superiority. Also, the Russians started to outnumber us again, but we had still the air superiority. You will see why the Russians, of course, had all kind of help. Stalin had from the French Communist organization the Normandy Yemen fighters, whom he supplied with the most modern Russian aircraft, the Yak-9, and I have a picture there. We encountered them first over Latvia when this squadron came into action, and they caused us quite a few losses. They were good pilots, but that was already in the Spanish Civil War. There were even American pilots who flew for Stalin, communists, the Lincoln Brigade that flew in the Spanish Civil War. You don't hear much here because it wasn't much made public, but the Lincoln Brigade, until the Americans were so turned off being commanded by Russian officers in the International Brigade, you see. They tried to push the Americans around and said, no, we don't take that. Then they moved back to America, but then they were known as communist supporters, and I guess they were booked by the CIA. My last mission was actually over Eastern Prussia. Well, the Russians had quite a superiority in numbers. They outnumbered us 10 or 20 to 1 by that time, with all the deliveries, what they get. It was an EL-2, and I met an hour and a half. I shot that Stormovik down south of Danzig. An hour and a half in an interrogation or prison camp. I met that captain. His tail gunner was a woman. She died in a crash. And this captain was brought to the interrogation and prison camp. And SS officers invited me to come to the interrogation. So I went. And of course, I was not given much chance to talk. But what came out of this, the Russian was quite straight. He said, well, you better treat me good, because next week you will be my prisoners. And we had a big laugh, But that, it more or less came true. The guys that couldn't escape from that encircled East Prussia, like we could fly out, but only 15 of us, from 65 planes that we had delivered, they were wrecked in no time, and 15 pilots had the chance to go to the west. And of course, in my mind was always, when we go to the west, it's either Sweden or Denmark. That is the British territory, which we will probably surrender to the British. And that was our commanding officer give us the last briefing that we will surrender to the British in Copenhagen. We never surrender to the Russians. You know that. I know that. You know, what we saw in atrocities in the East. There was no way to think even to surrender to Russians. Yeah, I saw lots of this in the countryside around Königsberg. They raped the woman, nailed it on the barn door, and guts hanging out, you know. When our troops made the counterattack, they didn't make no prisoners, yeah.
A visit from Luftwaffe ace and General Adolf Galland.
Interesting was when General Galland, our new fighter general then, visited us in Berg near Magdeburg, and he just came from the briefing with Air Marshal Göring, where he threw his decorations down on his feet. And the story was, the press said he threw it on the table, but he threw it on his feet. And Göring said, Galland, I have you shot for that. Yeah. Instead, he didn't shoot him, but he gave him a 262 squadron. JK 77, that was the first jet squadron, and Galland was the commanding officer, but not as general, as airman. He took his rank down, his decorations were on Göring's feet, and Galland flew as an airman. Yeah. And he scored. His last score was Marauders, 2 Marauders over Munich. Yeah. And the Marauder was known as a deadly plane to attack. They had automatic weapons to the rear, yeah, what do you call it, remote weapons. And but Galland got them, and they got him too, pretty good, and he ended up the war in the hospital.
Horst's conversation with Adolf Galland during the airbase visit.
Galland came from Berlin to visit us and to see the readiness of our unit, and he told us, you know, to forget. He asked every pilot about what they think about. You're from the Eastern Front. He asked me, what do you think about? I said, well, Galland, General, if we don't get something better than what we have, we cannot measure up to this bomber onslaught. Yeah. He said, I know that, everybody knows that. I was just in Berlin and I get dressed down. I was told, forget the 262. We will not have it as a fighter. I don't give up, he said to us all. We were an assembled group of pilots. I will still work on it, but Göring told me that this will be used as a fighter bomber or a blitz bomber, you know, to punish England for the attacks. Yeah, that was in their mind. Yeah, and I don't want to hear anymore. And then came the story where he put down his decorations when Galland refused to do things that Göring wanted. So he became an airman and flew as an airman and still a commander until Göring saw the mistake and gave him a group of 262s. But the visit was very interesting for us because we heard a little bit. Also, we were forbidden to talk even about the jet. Yeah.
Horst's opportunity to fly the new Me-262 jet.
Well, it was so much faster than any American or British plane, about over 60 miles or maybe closer to 100. But the speed is not a guarantee that you can knock something down. It made it more difficult to aim, and you have completely new situations to get used to the new technique. And that's not done in a day or in a week. You have to have a little bit more training. Now, I had the chance to fly the 262 coming by at the Brandenburg Brest Arado factory, and I refilled with my 109 there, and I met a not test pilot who was a buddy of mine in Mulder's group, and he became a test pilot for Arado. He flew the 262, and he met me there, and he said, "Horst, how are you doing? And where are you going?" I said, "I go to Denmark to prepare for something new." Well, we prepared the runways in Denmark for long takeoffs for the 262. He said, "You want to fly something new? I have something new." I said, "Yeah, what is it?" "Well, shut up, go to the flight officer, put your name on the flight order, and I'll take you up." And he took me up in a 262 two-seater. That was end of 44 when they started to build them as two-seaters, and I had the chance to fly 2 flights with them. We flew from Brandenburg, that's west of Berlin, to Hamburg, circled Hamburg, Perleberg, and back Berlin and Brandenburg. And that was an hour and 20 minutes, you know. That didn't fly much longer, had no extra tanks, nothing. But after one flight, I was able, a few hours later, to have another one. I didn't want to go back on my 109 anymore. But I had the order to fly to Denmark and prepare for the transfer from southeast Germany, Liegnitz, which was east of Dresden even. You know, the Russians came into Breslau, and we had the bomb of Dresden, so we were in a bad situation there. So we were transferred, and you see, since we trained bomber pilots, it's obvious they wanted the bomber pilots for the 262. They were the men that could fly a twin engine, but not young students that couldn't even fly a single engine. That was a ridiculous thing to tell us, you wait, you old pilot can wait with the 262, fly the 109, you are used to it, give the young ones a chance to survive. Well, how can they survive when they cannot even fly a one engine? Yeah, that was a ridiculous thing. Yeah.
Final flight to surrender to anyone but the Russians.
I was flying the last sorties to the 4th of May, 45, in the close between Danzig and Pillow, on a strip of land, an acreage that was not the runway, nothing, yes, an acreage that we made an airport, you know, and that was close to the Baltic Sea coast. We got out of that hole there, bomb hole after bomb hole, temporarily repaired. We were 15 planes, 13 made it, 2 keeled over in bomb holes and did not come out there. So we were 13 planes that could aim to the west to surrender to the British. That was the order that was given to us in Copenhagen. They are already there, and we can surrender there. And we did decide definitely not to surrender to the Russians. I took off and criminal takeoff, but I made it. So I flew over the Baltic Sea, and I saw my tank got emptier and emptier, and my auxiliary tank did not refill the main tank. So my time was limited. So I came to the Swedish coast after an hour or so, and I kept more to the Swedish coast than to the German coast of Bornholm, the island that was to Denmark, Bornholm, and that was just a small landing strip there anyway. That wouldn't have been an ideal thing. So I striped the Swedish coast, and when I saw Malmö and my red light started already, I think 20 minutes is the red light, the warning to go down or else, yeah. And that warning made me pretty nervous, of course. And there I saw Malmö Bulltofta, the South Swedish airport, which was often used by Lufthansa Airlines from Berlin to Stockholm. They landed in Malmö. That was a regular airport there. So I went down, and the engine conked out, and I made a dead stick landing and stood right in the middle of the airport. Here came a vehicle, a flight lieutenant jumped out and on my wing, and a truck with 20 infantrymen that immediately surrounded my plane with rifles down and bayonet planted. The officer jumped on my plane, opened the canopy, and he said, "I am Sven Forsén, Lieutenant Sven Forsén, fighter wing tank. Welcome in Sweden. You are interned. For you the war is over. Handle me your sidearm and don't make any sabotage on the plane, please." I said, yeah, and he said it in fluent German. And I handed him my 765 Browning, which he put in his jacket, probably never turned into the government. Anyway, I jumped out. I did not pull my TNT kilo to blow it up, you know. And of course I saw 80 or more American 4-engine planes around the airport there, all over, you know. And I knew somehow the Americans are here, you know. Well, that turned out later, after the next day when I was there, temporarily installed in a cooler. Voluntarily I went there. They had no guards and nothing, facilities. Said, "Horst, we would like you to talk more, and there are officers coming from Stockholm who want to talk to you." Of course, the war was over. I was free to talk. I had no more oath to follow. I felt free also. So the war is over. Well, I believe you. You know, we saw the situation, and I was very lucky there. They treated me Swedish smorgasbord, and I just did eat so much horse meat in the last months in our place there. You see, East Prussia has the finest racehorses. Yeah, dozens and dozens of places where they race the Arabian breed. Okay, well, I ate the finest Swedish bread and other things, fish, which we never had lately, and I rejected all other meat. That the Swedish officers, they all, what's that? Aren't you hungry? I said, I'm very hungry, but I have enough meat eaten the last. That was funny for them and funny for me. But of course, the Swedish officers, high-ranking officers, I couldn't detail them what they were. They asked me a hole in my belly about how the Russians were fighting and this and that. And I give them freely answers because I didn't feel I have to follow an oath and keep silent. And yes, and since I cooperate with them, they treated me nicer and nicer, you know. They let me run around free on the airport. I could have a guy with me. I asked the officer the second day, Sven Forsén was his name, and I would like to talk to the American crews here. What do you have? Oh, they're back in England. I said, I beg your pardon? I thought Sweden was neutral. Oh, yeah, well, but don't talk about it, he said. That could cost me my rank. I'm not supposed to tell you that. So we became good friends from the beginning, yeah.
So much for avoiding surrendering to the Russians.
The funny thing, half a year later, Stalin requested all soldiers, Latvians, Estonians, Lithuanians that fought on the German side, and the German contingent that fought in Russia, East Prussia, Stalin wanted to have them all sent to Russia. And the Swedish government, very communist-orientated. The foreign minister was a communist, the trade minister and some others. So they outnumbered in the government, and they wanted that Stalin gets his will. Well, he threatened, otherwise they became neighbor with Stalin then. There was no more German fleet on the Baltic Sea, so Sweden was direct connected with Russia. So what could they do? We understood that all, but it was hard for us to swallow that the press reported that we will be deported to Russia, and not as POWs, because definitely we were slave labor. Yeah? And the Russians needed in the industry, in the shipyards, engineering, and most of our guys were skilled people. Yeah? Some very highly skilled turbine engineers for the Navy, yeah, which the Russians definitely needed. Yeah? And they didn't go home when we get home in '49. So I came with the first transport in January, pardon me, with the last. The first transport was December '45, the next one at the very end of December, and on the 22nd of January '46, I was with the last transport, which the Russians called, we were the big fascists, the big Nazis. We understood to stay in Sweden to the last. We were in the hospital. Well, our guys mostly opened the veins here and smeared the blood and were brought in the hospital. I did the same. I opened up here a little. That's why I have the bad arthritis now. I opened up and smeared the blood all over, so they didn't get me into the ship, this transport. But with the third ship that came to Trelleborg, they brought us all over to Libau, Latvia, which was Soviet Republic then. Yeah. In Libau we worked in a shipyard, in a sugar factory, and in '47 we were transferred to Mariupol on the Black Sea, Azov Sea, far east from the Black Sea, east of the Crimean island, close to where the trouble is now, Iran, very close. So, and we built up an American steel plant, built and mailed and sent over to Russia by USS Steel. It was shipped in '43, I think, to Murmansk, Arkhangelsk, the northernmost port. From there it took the Russians 4 years to bring that material down to the south to build up that new plant. Well, naturally there was the most material, raw material, all busted tanks and guns. The most and heaviest stuff was down in the south, where we had the Stalingrad combat, and the south was the one loaded with army material that could be remelted. Well, in a year and a half, we had that American steel plant running. It produced 80 tons of steel in 8 hours. They worked around the clock. So 240 tons of new produced steel was ready for the Black Sea fleet, which they are then ready to build. Today it belongs to the Ukraine, which is an independent country, part of the NATO, yeah, which is a thorn in the eyes of Putin, definitely, because they built the most modern ships there.
German POWs get a raw deal after the war from the Allies, and the Russians win.
Well, that was strictly against the Genfer Convention. See, Eisenhower, on order of Washington, did send 1 million prisoners into, you know what, eternity, in the Rheinwiesen. He declared them, they got no help from Switzerland, from nowhere. They said, Eisenhower said that, of course, on order of Washington, you bet. They are de-armed, declared nearly 1 million, 800 to 1 million. A Canadian author wrote about that. German prisoners as disarmed enemy troops, not POWs, you know, and the American army takes care of that. Well, they did not, because that was bad weather, starvation and all this, so you can imagine what happened. That Canadian, I have the book also from Canada, you know, and it's very interesting to know what happened after there, what they did to our troops, yeah. we had officers from Reims Attaché, which was an American officers camp. They released these staff officers, high-ranking old men, 70 and older. So they were of no use. They sent them home, most of them to Berlin. The Russians caught them and brought them as propaganda material into our camps. In 46, they said, look how the Americans treated you guys. Propaganda, you know, at that time. And they told us in Attaché, when the American camps and storage was dissolved, they burned everything down. The hungry French population didn't get a bite out of that. And they, from then on, the Frenchmen hated what was going on. Yeah. They had a misfeeling about the American. Yeah, but that was American order. My first wife worked in an American hospital in Berlin, and she was fired for taking a chicken leg home. She could eat in the hospital, not taking anything home. And she had a hungry son at home. Well, those were all kind of things that happened on both sides, you know, and when you think about it, you know, it was probably not willfully, but some idiot created that situation and it was carried out. Now these staff officers, the interesting thing, were just about introduced from the Russians into our camp to tell us how bad the Americans treated the German and French population. Yeah. We couldn't believe it.
The Russian windfall and atrocities after the German surrender.
My aircraft factory was surprisingly working on all kinds of rockets. Unfortunately, it fell all into Russian hands because the factory, all that territory east Berlin, fell into Russian hands. Eisenhower or Washington or whoever did not realize what they gave up not to get into Berlin. Yeah? Let the Russians take it. Berlin was heavy industry all around, and particular aircraft industry. And it was not in a city, it was outside, 20, 30, 50 miles outside. My sister worked for a radio outfit near Blue Point, Telefunken, you know, the radio radar equipment. The 8th Air Force bombed the hell out of that place. And when she was off the job there, her manufacturing, they were Sendlinger Optical Glass Works. They made lenses for aircraft navigation and all. They were bombed out too with Telefunken. And that was a big hit, you know. It was right in a city. So my sister went to the Air Force as volunteer from January 45 and learned radio and radar techniques. That was outside Berlin, near Hamburg. And she was lucky, and when the war ends, she was captured by the British and not in Russian hands. They raped everything from 12 to 60 years, you know. That was unbelievable. My mother, who spoke Polish, was luckily happy to say that she was not even touched by the Russians. She spoke to them in Polish, balit, you know, that means sick, said syphilis. And then that was the death penalty for Russian soldiers. They had no treatment for venereal diseases. So I don't know where she got it, but somehow she must have had it from neighbors or what. And when they just kicked her in the butt and sent her away, they didn't touch her at all. So mother was not but she said it was terrible to see the other woman raped and gang raped. Yeah? And what they had for 1 month until the Western Allies came into Berlin, they had free hand to do what they wanted. Yeah.
Why the German government didn't rescue the German POWs in Russian prison camps.
There was no German government, you see. That was the thing. And in 49, when we were released, thanks to Harry Truman and Konrad Adenauer. Konrad Adenauer was always a counterpart of Hitler, but Hitler did not kill him or mistreat him. He just separated him. But after the war, he was a welcome for a government person. And he was the one that took Germany out of the worst misery. He was one of the Schumann and the other American who European help and the airlift and all this. And then, of course, Adenauer and Truman got us out of Russia. They put the thumb on the table and said, Stalin, you release the prisoners. You have them 4 years to build up. That's enough. You have to send them home. We came home as skeletons, but we came home. Yeah?
Food scarcity in the Russian POW camp.
Well, if we worked willfully and listened to their propaganda and kept our mouths shut, we were treated like the Russian people that worked 8 hours, 8 or 10, whatever was necessary. We did not work too much overtime because we were completely finished with 8. You know, I mean, 3 times a water soup, 3 times 200-gram bread that was a square like this, rye bread. When you squeezed it, the water ran out, yeah? And they gave us a soup. There was corn in it, this yellow corn, yeah. And a potato maybe a green tomato, and there was hardly any fat on it, or no meat, you know. The only fat, and so we could, if we had the chance to steal Semetskis, that was sunflower seed, that was really to pep you up a little, you know. There was something in it, and even what we stole from the cattle bins, what they fed the pressed out oil, and there were discs about 10, 12 inches wide, half an inch thick. It was pretty hard on your gum, but you chewed that until you get something out. There was always some nourishment in the peelings of the sunflower. Can you imagine? It's pressed out, and yet in the peels there is something that is nourishing. So we learned that very fast, yeah. And in the Ukraine particular, we had a chance to get, and then in the fields there were wild peaches or apricots or wild cherries, and green stuff, wheat, you know, these nettles they call it. We cooked the spinach out of it. Anything that was eatable. In the shipyard in Libau, Latvia, we cooked the bones, grinded the bones to a powder and a little water and so, and then we baked cookies on the stove that stunk like a glue factory. But you see, anything that was eatable or could be made eatable, you learned in the prison. Yeah, I came home in September 2249 from Russia, not without being checked on the Russian-Polish border. We had to pass naked, and we were checked in every crevice of your body if we haven't hidden something, a photo, a telephone number or something. That was a very ugly situation. And the Russian so-called doctors, mostly women, they went into your body from every angle to find something. Yeah. So what you didn't have in your head to remember phone numbers or to give news to people of buddies that you were with, you know.
Malnourished and grossly underweight at the time of release.
Well, in the Air Force, I had the normal weight and size, 6 foot tall, you know, 1.86 meters, and I was 185 German pounds. The German pound is heavier than the English pound. It's exactly half a kilo or 500 grams. I weighed 185 German pounds in the Air Force. That was a very common, good, healthy weight. In Russia, I was worked down to 118 pounds was the last, and that was German pounds, 118 pounds. And today I have nearly double that in kilo, 228 I go in with dialysis, 124, 125 I come home, that's kilos. But the dialysis takes out 3.5 kilo in liquid out of your body, and that's quite a bit. For the day of dialysis, I am done for the rest of the day. Yeah.
Finally released into West Berlin and then on to Canada.
I could hardly walk on my feet. And the funny thing, they give the best what they had, a linen suit, a linen shirt, something like this, in a blue color and very thin pants, and rubber soled, maybe half an inch, no, half a quarter inch the most sole, and like a sandal, you know. That was our homecoming suit, yeah. And when we came into the final release camp in Frankfurt Oder, that was on the Polish-German borderline, they played all the communist songs and the march music and, you know, tried to keep us in East Germany. You know, don't go to the West. There's joblessness, prostitution, and so on, you know, everything bad in the American and British sector. And we laughed and said, well, let's go over there anyway. We didn't have something for 4 years. Yeah. And all these communist propagandists, you know, the SED, Socialist Einheitsparty, the Socialist Union Party, that was a communist German, East German party, you know, they tried everything to tie us down in East Germany. And we had our passport, we could go. That was the only chance to get out of there. And I came to West Berlin, or to the release station, and my sister picked me up. She had a little shock when she saw me, and my mother even more. She just said, and started crying. She was all over in tears. And what have they done to you? I said, never mind, mother. We start all new. And my American brother-in-law, who was already deciding to get married with my sister, and he took care of me. He bought from the PX that they were stationed there in the Andrew Barracks, which was the former SS Adolf Hitler quarters, you know. It was a very fine building and swimming pool and everything. And the American honor guards were stationed then there. And Jim brought all kind of food and really pepped me up. Within no time, I was on my feet again. In half a year recovery, I was serving first in the police force, then I got a job at British European Airways as a deputy foreman for the traffic line there. And then I decided, when I saw the political mess up in Berlin, that the Russians could be in every day. You know, that was the fear, you know. Will the Americans pull out, they will be right in again. And we had enough from what we heard all about what happened. So I volunteered to go to Canada. The church, the Lutheran church, paid my in advance, and I promised to repay. And within 2-3 months, I had my family on the way. And the Canadian immigration officer said, how did you make it possible to save $200 that you can bring over your family? I said, well, I worked. And well, what did you eat from? Well, I said, I eat the rest from Simpson and Sears kitchen. When they closed the doors to the public, we worked in a catalog mailing. We could eat all what was left over. So we filled up for the next day. And I saved all my pay. That was $50 a week. Within 2 months, I could claim my family to come over. No Canadian would do that, they said. And the Italian were even worse, you know. Italian immigrants, they were living with 8 families in one house. I had a family that let me live there for free in a basement but it was cool, 100 degrees in May in Toronto already. So I had a free stay there, had a bed, and that was all I needed. And that was family from Yugoslavia. The husband was a Yugoslavian, a Serb, and the wife was a German woman. And they gave me that. They said, we started the same way, and you have that, and we don't charge you anything. I said, wonderful. That was a result that I helped the Travelers Aid, the Canadian woman at the Union Station in Toronto. They needed somebody to speak English. And all the immigration group, all the German people that came to Canada, no one was there that understood the word. So I placed them with the travel aid all into quarters there, which accepted immigrants and gave them a start, you know.
A Canadian pension, a wife and 3 children, and a divorce all lead to a new life.
So when I went to Canada, I earned for 13 years serving Canada. I not only worked there and made the money and served the industry as auto repairman, but specialist in metalwork, you know. They made lots of money out of these things. But I gave them also 2 children, or actually 3, 1 adopted son and 2 of my own children. In revenge for my divorce to my first wife, she made them Canadians, you know, against my will. But what could I do? You know, I had in Atlanta a divorce for $140. So I forget all my house in Canada. I give it up. I said, have it, you know, take it. You know, she wanted it, said, take it. And I was a free man, went to California and started a new life.
Horst passed away in Wichita, Kansas on May 16, 2011 at the age of 89. His humble story of valor and service to his country live on at Air Combat Journal. If you've enjoyed this oral history, check out my other interviews on this Air Combat Journal YouTube channel. I try and post 3 interviews per month. Also, please support this channel by subscribing. Subscribing is easy. Just click on the small subscribe button. By subscribing, you'll let YouTube know this is a relevant channel with compelling content. As a subscriber, you'll also get notifications each time I post a new video. Thank you for watching, and as always, I welcome your comments. Godspeed.